Coming up on We Talk News this week, the lame duck session of Congress is upon us, and so are the rumors about the Safe Banking Act and other federal cannabis reforms being introduced this year. Plus, Ireland introduces decriminalization legislation for cannabis. We'll hear from Martin Condon in the Emerald Isle. It's December 1st, opening day for adult use sales in Maryland and Rhode Island licensed dispensaries. Curaleaf is laying off over 200 employees as the economic market correction continues in cannabis. Plus, a new analysis of 1,500 regular cannabis users show that a placebo can be just as effective in dealing with chronic pain as cannabis. Really? Hey, nobody asked me. How about you? We Talk News with Elena Pinto is next.
We are Pro Cannabis Media.
Hi, everyone. Welcome to this week's Weed Talk News. I'm Elena Pinto. As the president returns from his Thanksgiving holiday on Nantucket, and we wait to see when he'll sign that recent cannabis research bill into law, there are more moving efforts to see some kind of reform when it comes to financing in cannabis. This week, the Independent Community Bankers of America sent a letter to Congress party leaders Chuck Schumer and Mitch McConnell, urging the chamber to consider passing the Safe Banking Act before 2022 is out. 44 affiliated state community banking associations also joined in on the call to Congress. Democratic senators like Chuck Schumer and Cory Booker have previously said that federal cannabis reform has a, quote, good chance of passing during the lame duck session. So we'll have to see if this pressure from financial institutions provides any pull. And meanwhile, there is movement in several countries overseas. Officials in Ireland have introduced a bill to legalize recreational cannabis for personal use. The legislation would modify the country's Misuse of Drug Act, officially allowing adults 18 and older to possess up to 7 grams of cannabis or 2.5 grams of hashish. Martin Condon from Martin's World podcast in Ireland weighs in on what it could mean for that country.
Yeah, well, I suppose the bill got its origins going back to December 2020, when it was first announced that the Cannabis Regulation Bill of 2020 was going to be published. But it didn't get published until only just last week. And it didn't actually meet the initial goals that it wanted to do. It was looking for outright legalization, which would have included legislating for the sale and supply of cannabis. But after a lot of back and forth between the PLA here, which is the Public Law Associates or something like that, these people who help our lawmakers write these policies to make sure it's not conflicting with other policies, such as the Treaty on Narcotics that we have with the UN. So the bill currently that went forward is a decriminalization of cannabis bill. It doesn't allow for the sale and supply, but it will allow for up to 7 grams of cannabis herb and 2.5 grams of cannabis resin in your possession without you being regarded as a criminal.
And Ireland isn't the only country looking to make changes. Poland is also looking to go legal, and Spain may be considering adding medical cannabis access for its people. Our European correspondent, Lex Pelger, has those stories and more.
Hello, I'm Lex Pelger from Whitewell Creations with this week's European Cannabis Report for Weed Talk News. In Spain, the Ministry of Health stated they are moving forward in crafting regulations for medical cannabis. Their focus will be on the quality of the products and to ensure the protection of public health. Most likely, prescriptions will be written by doctors and fulfilled by national pharmacies inside of hospitals. They are also considering a centralized registry of patients. It's interesting to see Spain coming late to the medical cannabis world because they are far ahead recreationally with their tolerance of the cannabis social clubs that occur across that country. In the Netherlands, the Court of Justice of the European Union ruled that the country cannot deport a Russian man who uses medical cannabis when it is not legally available in his home country. This man suffers from a rare blood cancer that causes extreme pain, and so this ruling recognizes the importance of medical cannabis for pain management. The court noted that EU law forbids EU countries from returning non-EU citizens who stay illegally in an EU country if they suffer from a severe illness and if returning that person to their home country would cause a rapid, significant, and permanent deterioration in their state of health. And in Poland, the drug commissioner announced plans to submit legislation for an adult use cannabis market that might launch by 2024. Poland is already one of the largest medical cannabis markets in Europe, and with their neighbors Germany and Czech moving forward with legalization, it seems likely that they want to keep pace. That's a European Cannabis Report for this week. For more on the science side, see my newsletter on Substack, Cannabinoids and the People. I'm Lex Pelger from White Whale Creations, reporting for Weed Talk News.
The midterm election brought cannabis legalization for a few states, including Missouri. Medical weed has already been legal there for some time, but how soon will you be able to buy your own green in the Show Me State? Well, Brandon Jones breaks it down in this week's Missouri Report.
Hey everybody, it's Brandon Jones from Distribution Maven, Missouri Cannabis Report for Weed Talk News. And that's right, medical marijuana has been here in Missouri for about a year and a half now, but just passed on November 8th, they passed Amendment 3 that will actually allow for adult use, recreational use, however you'd like to use it. I prefer adult use cannabis to start. It actually goes into effect December 8th. So we are less than a week away from that actually going into effect. And then as far as when you can actually start to purchase that, that's a little bit up in the air right now. Some people are saying June is when the first state you'll actually be able to start purchasing. Others are saying as soon as each individual facility can pass their certification, then they'd be allowed to actually have access. Another big thing is obviously expungement. So expungement is supposed to happen pretty much immediately with those that are not incarcerated. For anyone that has a non-violent cannabis crime, it is non-DUI, or it was not distributing to minors. Those are the things that are still going to be kept, illegal and not getting allowed for expungement. All that expungement is supposed to be done by June, and they are starting with obviously the least complicated cases and working their way all the way up to the most complicated by the end. But they did give themselves a June 8th deadline to get all of that expungement records done. So it's a big crazy time here in Missouri. There are lots of lounges getting ready to start opening and different things, and the culture is really starting to take off. More different brands are getting ready to come into the state, and the ones that are already here are pumping up their cultivation sites and getting ready for the increase in sales. So in short, maybe a little bit faster than June, but everything is going to be going into effect December 8th. So again, I'm Brandon Jones from Distribution Maven with Missouri Cannabis Report for Weed Talk News. Stay medicated and educated.
A budding cannabis industry will always have its growing pains, right? And unfortunately for some companies, that's resulting in painful layoffs. The latest being corporate giant Curaleaf. Business Insider confirms the company laid off more than 200 employees ahead of Thanksgiving holiday. And according to Insider, Curaleaf gave a statement saying the cuts were, quote, a part of an effort to control costs and drive efficiencies in the face of economic uncertainties ahead. A spokesperson for Curaleaf would not say which departments the cuts applied to, and Curaleaf CEO Matt Darren also reportedly told Insider the company was in talks with unionized employees at affected locations. And unionization seems to be a theme among corporate cannabis as of late. Some employees of Trulieve are now looking to unionize in the Keystone State. Claudia Post has our Pennsylvania report this week.
I'm Claudia Post from Scarlet Express, and I'm here in the Keystone State, Pennsylvania, reporting for Weed Talk News. Certain low-income seniors in Pennsylvania will receive financial assistance for their medical cannabis treatment thanks to a newly launched pilot program in the state. The state's Department of Health launched the program to offer a $50 a month stipend in financial assistance to help senior citizens afford the cost of medical marijuana. Because insurance companies, as we all know, don't include the medical marijuana in their prescription coverage, medical marijuana patients are left to pony up for the full cost of their medicine. These payments are the first step toward establishing a third phase for financial assistance programs offered to help low-income medical marijuana patients afford their medicine. Moving on, workers at Trulieve Medical Marijuana Dispensary in Pittsburgh's North Shore neighborhood on Monday voted to join the UFCW Local 1776. The UFCW Local 1776 now represents roughly about 600 cannabis workers in Pennsylvania. That's a lot of people. The Pennsylvania medical marijuana market is in upheaval, with smaller companies getting squeezed by falling wholesale prices, while their ranks are thinned by growing consolidation among multi-state operators. The situation has spurred independent operators to call on the state's government for help, and with one company accusing medical marijuana regulators of failing to enforce the rules and allowing a monopolistic control of the state's system. The price drop comes as multi-state operators are gearing up for the prospect of adult use legalization and buying smaller independent marijuana businesses that are struggling and laying off employees in an increasingly crowded market. The dispensaries are having a difficult time if they're not affiliated with a multi-state operator. A large publicly traded MSO can survive a long period of time without being profitable, and a standalone can't. It's virtually impossible to compete with somebody who doesn't have to be profitable in the short run. Okay, that's a wrap from Pennsylvania. I'm Claudia Post from Scarlet Express, and I'll be back next week to talk about what's hot and what's not. From Weed Talk News, have a fabulous week.
A big change coming to the way weed business is done in Maine. This week, the Maine Office of Cannabis Policy sent out a notice informing the industry that regulators will no longer be enforcing residency requirements, which required medical cannabis business owners to be Maine residents. A court ruling in August found the residency requirement to be unconstitutional. And now it looks like regulators will be adhering to that decision. Will it mean a more competitive market or a flood of supply for the state? Only time will tell. In nearby Massachusetts, a first of its kind partnership is coming to the state, and Weed Talk News producer Tori Chamberlain has the details in this week's Bay State Report.
Hey guys, I'm Tori Chamberlain, and here's what's happening in Massachusetts this week. Tilt Holdings, which is a multi-state operating cannabis business that works with several different brands across the country, is introducing and announcing a new partnership that's a pretty exciting one. They're teaming up with the Shinnecock Indian Nation to launch a product brand right here in Massachusetts. The partnership will introduce Little Beach Harvest's ancestral plant medicine to Massachusetts. Now that sounds like a mouthful, but basically we're getting some real representation of Native Americans in cannabis right here in Massachusetts. I think this is super exciting because Tilt Holdings, as you may have remembered from my previous reports, has also teamed up with people like Ricky Williams to bring their brands to the Bay State. And it seems that Tilt Holdings really does have a stake in brands that have not only social equity stakes behind them, but really bring a meaningful story to the cannabis space. So I'm really excited to see the first Native American backed cannabis brand coming to Massachusetts, and I can't wait to try it and let you all know how it is. And speaking of products, the Massachusetts High Times Cup winners were just recently announced. It was a big showing of all kinds of products, flowers, concentrates, solvent and non-solvent, as well as distillate cartridges, non-distillate cartridges, edibles, everything you can think of. The results are in, and it's way too many for me to name, but of note, TreeWorks and Happy Valley took home several awards across multiple categories. So shout out to them and everyone else who participated in the cup. You can check out the results on High Times website and try some of those winning products for yourself. That's what's happening in the Bay State this week. I'm Tori Chamberlain.
President Biden made headlines when he pardoned thousands of people convicted of federal cannabis-related charges. And it wasn't too long after that Oregon Governor Kate Brown took the same stance, pardoning tens of thousands of people convicted of cannabis offenses in her state. Marianne Kursagi has that story and more from Oregon this week.
I'm Marianne from Alibi Cannabis with this week's Oregon Cannabis Report for Weed Talk News. Next Wednesday, there is an open forum to discuss the lawsuit filed by Greenlight Law, attempting to open the doors to interstate commerce. Join us at the River Pig Saloon next Wednesday. Also, Governor Kate Brown announced that she will issue pardons for low-level marijuana possession convictions. The governor's office reported that the move would encompass 47,000 pardons and affect approximately 45,000 individuals. The action also forgives about $14 million in associated fines and levies. This is great news for those individuals. And lastly, this year's outdoor harvest fell from approximately 5.3 million pounds to 4.1 million pounds, a drop of more than 20%. We will be watching closely to see what this does to the market, competition, and pricing for 2023. That'll do it for the Oregon Report this week. I'm Marianne with Alibi.
If you live in Michigan, some changes are coming to the way business is done there as well, particularly when it comes to how you pick up your weed and where you live. Here's Michigan NORML Executive Director Rick Thompson with the story.
Hello again, everyone. This is the Michigan Report with Rick Thompson for Weed Talk News. Let's begin. Well, there'll be no curbside pickup of cannabis in Alpena, according to a judge's decision this week. Alpena has, as a part of its ordinance language, a clause stating, and I quote, "All business operations of a facility or establishment must occur indoors. Facilities and establishments may not provide drive-through service," end quote. Neighborhood Provisions, which is an Alpena cannabis retailer, was forced by city officials to stop curbside delivery to 4 parking spaces in their lot. So they sued to challenge the city's ordinance language in court. On Monday, Judge Ed Black ruled in favor of the city, but the judge agrees with Neighborhood Provisions' argument that curbside delivery is allowable for state licensed cannabis companies everywhere it is not forbidden by local law. The judge said, "I can't make it make sense. That's not my job." Thanks, Ed. Look for a citizen petition to pop up in Alpena to correct this outdated rule set sometime in 2023. NORML of Michigan is sponsoring a poll question to gauge the temperature of Michigan residents to modify our state's existing medical marijuana law. NORML has a long history of sponsoring poll questions, most notably in the run-up to the state's 2 tries at legalizing cannabis through MI Legalize, one in 2016 and one in 2018. As before, the group is using the Epic MRA company for polling services. The language of the poll question reads, Michigan's Medical Marijuana Act of 2008 regulates the activities of registered medical marijuana patients and or their registered caregivers, including placing limits on the number of marijuana plants they may grow for their own use or for the use of a patient under their care. Based on your own experience or what you may have heard about how the medical marijuana law has worked over the past 14 years, do you think the law should be relaxed to permit greater rights and privileges to patients and caregivers? Should it be changed to place greater restrictions on activities involving medical marijuana? Or do you think the law is working well as it is and should remain unchanged? The 4 options for response are: relax the law, change to be more restrictive, remain unchanged, or undecided, refuse to answer. The results of the poll are expected to be published in the 2nd week of December. And that's it for the Michigan Report with Rick Thompson on Weed Talk News.
And finally, a new study on the effects of cannabis is making some waves this week. While many cannabis consumers claim to use the plant for pain relief, a group of scientists is potentially challenging that. A study they recently published to the Journal of the American Medical Association suggests cannabis is no better at relieving pain than a placebo. The study looked at the results of randomized controlled trials in which cannabis was compared with a placebo for the treatment of clinical pain. It specifically included studies comparing the change in pain intensity before and after treatment. 20 studies were conducted altogether, involving nearly 1,500 participants. The bottom line, quote, meta-analysis showed that pain was rated as being significantly less intense after treatment with a placebo, with a moderate to large effect depending on each person. Our team also observed no significant difference between cannabis and a placebo for reducing pain. The study hasn't been peer-reviewed, but it did have the hands of several doctors on it. So, could it hold some weight? Of course, having open access to study the plant would allow other institutions to peer-review this study. And we're all waiting, President Biden. But it certainly does open up an interesting conversation about the powers of cannabis and the mind. And the more people that are able to study the plant, the more we'll learn about how it affects us all. After all, it's a whole new world of weed out there. Use it wisely. That's it for Weed Talk News this week. I'm Elena Pinto.
It's a whole new world of weed out there, isn't it? Everyone is learning new ways to titrate, ingest, consume, imbibe, and engage with this plant medicine we call cannabis. Hi, I'm Jimmy Young, the founder of Pro Cannabis Media and the host of In the Weeds, and once in a while, the really live business cannabis talk show we call Green Rush on Friday afternoons from 4 p.m. to 6 p.m. Eastern. Now let me tell you my cannabis story. You know, I've had 4 major surgeries in the past 23 years and suffer from osteoarthritis with a variety of metal parts in my body and one on deck. Now, thanks to those chronic pain issues, I've been a medical patient in Massachusetts for almost 10 years now. I remember my first trip to a dispensary just outside of Boston, and I told the bud tender I didn't want to smoke it anymore. So I tried edibles, then tinctures, then vaping, and now if I'm going to smoke, I only use the Weegits filtration system. What? The Weegits.com, Weegits, that's weed, W-E-E-D, G-E-T-S.com, is where you'll find the planet's coolest product that cools the smoke from everyone's favorite flower. Now, the guy that started this was a pretty good medical device manufacturer, and he created this maze pipe that cools the smoking process from 1300 degrees Fahrenheit upon inflammation down to just 90 degrees when it reaches your mouth. That's right, 1300 down to 90. That's why this maze pipe is amazing. So here's how it works. You start with that glass bowl, you flame on, and then you inhale nice and smooth so the smoke goes through 3 different filtration and cooling systems. Now, if pre-rolls is your thing, you can use the Weegits filter that a pre-roll fits into perfectly. That's right, or even a chillum. The more filters, the smoother the draw. Best of all is the price. You can get all this, or one or the other, for just a few bucks. It'll cool your smoke and you'll give your lungs a break. Now, add in the code of PCMTV and you get 15% off. So just go to Weegits.com and check out the best way to enjoy a cooler smoke with less coughing and hacking and more peace of mind. All that resin and tar is collected in the polyurethane filters that are easy to clean with soap, water, and a few Q-tips. Your lungs will thank you, and so will I.
Which at first I thought, oh, I don't know if I'm an activist, but I have, held a bullhorn on the State House steps. I have frequently testified before the Cannabis Control Commission in the state legislature, and I'm not, shy about criticizing where I see, mistakes being made. So yeah, I think that's what differentiates me, just an appreciation for the plant. And then also I'm a cannabis entrepreneur myself. I've started businesses, so I've lived that entrepreneurial journey. I know how hard it is. It is absolutely a marathon, not a sprint. So I think that, I'm in the game, not just on the sidelines.
As a broker, we have access to many, many cannabis carriers. So I will go in with 2 or 3 quotes for people. The quotes might be $20,000 for one, $22,000 for another, $17,500 for another. Pretty close among the 3. What I tell people is it's not the pricing, it's what's included and not included, meaning exclusions. An exclusion in layman's terms is just something that's not included. It's not on the menu, so it's just not included. But if you don't know that, if no one shows you that on page 71 of a 150-page policy, you're not going to know. No one knows. I never met one person that says they read an insurance policy. If you do, I got some property in Florida for you.
Weed Talk and In the Weeds are 2 productions of Pro Cannabis Media supported by Revolutionary Clinics, one of the top medical cannabis dispensaries in the Massachusetts area, now with 3 locations in Greater Boston, 2 in Cambridge and 1 on Broadway in Somerville. Rev Clinics has a patient-first mission. They will customize your needs as a medical patient with the proper titration and combination of strains, flavors, and products. Rev Clinics, where the patient comes first.
So the reality of the matter is, big banks and small banks are going to be different in a lot of ways. And they're both going to have their advantages and disadvantages. For a business like cannabis, you really have to have an integral knowledge of that business and a real granular knowledge of that business and the players involved in it. And that's why if you look at the banks that are successful to play in this space in Massachusetts, they are smaller banks that are very heavy, intensified personal touch, human communication, where you don't get a lot of that with the bigger banks.
Bay State Cannabis Report is supported by Holyoke Cannabis, Holyoke's finest cannabis recreational experience.